largest operating steam locomotive in the world today is Union Pacific's 3985. The key word here is operating. Union Pacific's big boys, with their 4884 wheel arrangement, were over 135 feet long and weighed in at over 1,200,000 pounds. They were the largest steam locomotives ever built, but none are operating today. By no means should you conclude that the 3985 is small. It weighs in at a hefty 1,070,000 pounds, is almost 122 feet long, and stands just less than 17 feet high. Its 69-inch diameter drive wheels and 280 pounds per square inch boiler pressure are capable of developing nearly 100,000 pounds of tractive effort at the rail. During its years of normal service, the 3985 could attain speeds of 70 miles per hour. The 3985 is just one of 105 locomotives built with the 4664 wheel arrangement purchased by the Union Pacific Railroad. They became known as the Challenger class locomotives. The original 40 Challengers were delivered in 1936 and 1937. They differed in appearance and design from the later series of this locomotive, of which the 3985 belonged to. Some noticeable differences were the centered headlight and the smaller cab. The earlier series also had 22-inch diameter cylinders compared with the later series 21-inch, but both had 32-inch strokes. The earlier design had a single smokestack, smaller sand domes, and a smaller tender. The American Locomotive Company in Schenectady, New York, built all 105 of the Union Pacific Challengers. The 3985 was delivered to the Union Pacific in July of 1943 and is representative of the heavier series of 4664s. The 3985 is an articulated locomotive, meaning that the front engine and pilot are connected with a pivoting joint that allows everything below the boiler and in front of the second set of cylinders to operate freely. This allows the locomotive to negotiate tighter curves. 3985 operated its final miles of revenue service in late 1957 and was officially retired in 1962. It was then stored in the Cheyenne Roundhouse alongside Big Boy number 4023. In later years, both locomotives were moved out of the roundhouse and found themselves being shuffled around the Cheyenne yards. In 1975, the 4023 found its way to Omaha, Nebraska, where it was displayed outside UP's Omaha shops. It was later moved to Kennefic Park in Omaha and is now displayed at the Western Heritage Museum. While the 4023 was being introduced to Omaha, the 3985 was placed on display in Cheyenne in the railroad employees' parking lot adjacent to the depot. This move ultimately led to the return to operation of one of Union Pacific's finest examples of steam power. In 1979, a group of Union Pacific employees volunteered their off-duty time to bring the 3985 back to life. During the next 2 years, the volunteers applied over 8,000 man-hours to the 3985 project. This was completed in April of 1981, and in May of that same year, the 3985 was double-headed with Union Pacific's classic 484 locomotive, the 8444. Together, they journeyed to the opening ceremonies of Rail Fair in Sacramento, California. Over the next several years, the coal-burning Challenger operated numerous excursions and other various assignments. However, due to its propensity to shower the landscape with hot cinders from the firebox, it ignited numerous grass fires. In 1982, the 3985 was limited to operations between Cheyenne and Laramie, Wyoming. In 1990, the 3985 was converted to burn oil so it could be utilized over the rest of the Union Pacific system. On July 24th of that year, the 4664 pulled a light train to LaSalle, Colorado to test its oil firing capabilities. The trip to LaSalle was completed without incident, and on the return trip to Cheyenne, any questions regarding the success of the conversion were answered when the big Challenger charged up the 1% grade north of Greeley, Colorado, with well over 3,000 tons tied to her drawbar. Chasers along Colorado Highway 85 were treated to quite an impressive sight as the hard-charging Alco continued its climb northward toward Cheyenne. The oil conversion was an outstanding success, and the 3985 was now ready to fulfill a variety of assignments throughout the Union Pacific system. The first assignment came just 1 week later when the 3985 was assigned the task of pulling a complete 140-car, 7,600-ton double-stack train for shipper American President Lines. History was made on that August 1st morning when over 8,000 feet of modern contemporary equipment was pulled unassisted by the massive Challenger between Cheyenne and North Platte, Nebraska. The burly Alco product crested the summit of Archer Hill east of Cheyenne at 34 miles per hour and then unleashed her power across the western plains of Nebraska at speeds approaching 70 miles per hour. In September of 1990, the 3985 was again called to duty, pulling a passenger special between North Platte and Omaha in conjunction with the annual River City Roundup celebration. Occasionally, the steam locomotives of the Union Pacific are assigned a regular freight manifest while en route to their assignments. Such is the case here as we see the hard-charging Challenger departing Cheyenne, bound for North Platte and its date with the River City Roundup Special. You might take note of the 460 locomotive number 1243, riding on its own special flat car. Built in 1890, it traveled with the 8444 during 1990 to celebrate both its centennial and those of Idaho and Wyoming, and is now continuing that birthday celebration with 3985. The 1243 is now on display at the same Western Heritage Museum in Omaha, where the 4023 Big Boy resides. The following morning, 3985 stormed out of North Platte and headed east with 1990's edition of the River City Roundup Special. One of the highlights of this special was providing the Operation Lifesaver program an opportunity to allow busloads of school children to ride between stops, learning safety issues while witnessing a real live operating steam locomotive. This made the special train a favorite with the native public. The Union Pacific Railroad realized early on that the steam locomotives could be a positive public relations tool. One only has to witness this massive giant in action to understand its ability to impress onlookers. The 3985 can develop between 5,000 and 6,000 horsepower and under full throttle can consume up to 200 gallons of water per mile. Its huge 15 by 9 foot firebox can burn over 20 gallons of number 5 fuel oil in that same mile. The tender holds 25,000 gallons of water and 5,900 gallons of oil when full. Auxiliary tenders are often used directly behind the regular locomotive tender to carry additional water for the thirsty behemoth. Each of these tenders carries an additional 27,000 gallons of water. These auxiliary water cars were converted tenders from the 800 to 819 class steam locomotives and were originally modified to haul bunker oil for UP's turbine locomotives. The Union Pacific has a variety of ways to utilize the STEAM program, and often excursions are arranged for local groups or organizations when the locomotives are in their area on other business. Such was the case with this evening round-trip excursion between Omaha and Columbus, Nebraska, pulled for the Omaha-based Camarail Club. It was operated while the 3985 was in town for the River City Roundup festivities. The railroad also utilizes the STEAM program to promote employee functions. The Employees Club Special is a train operated for employees and retirees of the Union Pacific Railroad. The 1990 edition of this special got an extra bonus when the 3985 was coupled to the front end for the North Platte to Cheyenne portion of its journey. In May of 1991, the 3985 was again teamed up with its stablemate, the 844. Together, they again journeyed to Sacramento to help celebrate Railfair's 10th anniversary. Railfan organizations have always been drawn to the STEAM program and have sponsored numerous excursions. In June 1992, the Union Pacific Historical Society held its annual convention in Cheyenne, Wyoming, and it was only fitting that a trip over Sherman Hill be part of the convention festivities. The convention participants were far from disappointed, and it was only natural that the largest operating steam locomotive in the world tackle one of the most fabled mountain divisions in the world. Railfan groups have also been instrumental in sponsoring excursions while en route to and from scheduled activities. This was showcased in July of 1992 when the 3985 participated in the National Railway Historical Society's annual convention in San Jose, California. Through the efforts of the Pacific Limited Group, seating was made available on the round trip from Cheyenne to San Jose and return. Not all segments of the STEAM program's assignments include excursions, however. In this August 1992 scene, the Big 4664 was again on the point of a freight train on its way to Kansas City, Missouri, where it will pick up the passenger equipment and continue on to Houston, Texas, and that year's Republican National Convention. Winter operations of steam locomotives today are rare, but late in 1992, the 3985 operated a Santa Claus special for the CSX Railroad. On its return trip to Cheyenne, the Big Challenger demonstrates how impressive steam can be when the temperatures are low. Corporate and business groups have also sponsored events. In December of 1992, the Sutherland Lumber Company chartered a special train out of Kansas City. Designated the Santa Claus Special, the train offered dozens of school children the opportunity to not only see, but also ride behind their first steam locomotive. On May 17th of 1953, the Rocky Mountain Railroad Club sponsored the first steam excursion operated by the Union Pacific Railroad. It was pulled by the smoke wing-equipped Challenger number 3967. In May of 1993, 40 years later, the UP steam crew applied smoke wings to the 3985 at their Cheyenne shops. A special excursion was then operated from Denver to Laramie over Sherman Hill to commemorate the 40th anniversary of that very first trip. As with all Union Pacific steam specials, the Rocky Mountain Railroad Club's 40th anniversary excursion consist was made up from some of the railroad's collection of first-class equipment. The entire passenger fleet has been completely refurbished, and no other railroad can compare with its quality or size. An addition to the passenger car fleet is the steam program's own commissary car, the Sherman Hill. Converted from a former railway post office car, the Sherman Hill was basically designed by and built to the steam crew's specifications. Memorabilia and numerous souvenir items, including videotapes like this one, may be purchased in the Sherman Hill, with the proceeds helping to offset the operational cost of the steam program. These same items may also be purchased via mail order from the steam program and online at www.upsteam.com. Over the years, the Union Pacific has gained a reputation for the quantity and quality of photo run-bys performed during their excursions. Let's take a moment to experience a photo run-by Union Pacific style. After the passengers have formed their photo lines, the throttle is eased out and the show begins. While the passengers are reboarding, let's climb into the cab of the 3985 and enjoy a description of its controls by engineer Bob Krieger.
Challenger locomotive is Perkins, Wyoming, on the 40th anniversary of the first official public excursion on Union Pacific. We're on the fireman side of the locomotive right now, and I thought I'd give you a rundown as to what we have on here. This red handle up here is the warm water injector. When operated like this, what we do is we're injecting water into the boiler to keep our levels up so we make more steam. Down below here we have the brass handle is our oil valve. This is the oil firing valve that controls the amount of oil going into the firebox. The red handle up on top over here is the blower valve, used to create the artificial draft when we're sitting still. When we're moving, the exhaust off the locomotive creates the draft more and shuts the blower off. We work down this way, we have a series of tank heaters and stuff to heat the oil, and an atomizer valve to atomize the oil as it goes into the firebox. We've got pressure gauges, water gauges. Move over to the middle here, we'll show you the firebox. Engineer side of the locomotive. The fireman makes the steam, the engineer uses it up to make it go. The engineer side, you've got the throttle, this double trigger handle on the quadrant on the ceiling here. We squeeze it, pull it back, let the steam into the cylinders to make the piston come in and out and drive the lever. This is the reverse gear for forward and reverse. If you're going along, you always start out, you're down all fully forward. As you get going faster and faster, you work your way up towards about 33% cutoff. So if you're starting up the momentum of the engine do some of the work, save on fuel and water. You short sorts the valves inside and let the steam in. You've got the independent brake for the engine. The automatic brake for the train brakes. The valve. The engineer's side, we've got a cold water injector on the floor. We use this when the warm water injector doesn't work. It takes the steam away. Lower equipment on this side, we have the engineer too has a boiler gauge that shows the boiler pressure. He has a head end device now, which is replaced the cabooses. And he's got a water gauge, just the same. And he's got the whip lock inside. What we'll do is we'll pan the cab here now, so you can just get a look at it. Not anybody in the way.
Let's continue our travels with this magnificent locomotive with a special sponsored by Pacific Limited, commemorating the 125th anniversary of the laying of the Golden Spike. The train traveled west from Omaha to Ogden, Utah in May of 1994. The 3985 is housed and maintained in Cheyenne, Wyoming, along with the 844 and the remainder of the historical heritage fleet. Other members of the fleet include the classic set of rebuilt E9 units. In 1994, the 3985 teamed up with these elegant diesels as they climbed the famous Cajon Grade east of Los Angeles. They were later captured climbing Sema Hill amongst the area's ever-present Joshua trees. In May of 1995, the Big Challenger was in charge of the Cattle Baron Special between North Platte and Omaha, Nebraska. The 3985 then headed south from Omaha, headed for Texas for a series of excursions. Later that fall, the Pacific Limited was in charge of yet another group of excursions powered by the 3985, and this time joined by the flashy E9s. Every July, Cheyenne, Wyoming plays host to Frontier Days, and the Denver Post sponsors a chartered train to carry invited guests from Denver to the Wyoming capital and back on the first Saturday of the event. Over the years, the 3985 has become a very popular participant with this annual special. On July 20th of 1996, the largest operating steam locomotive in the world teamed up with the largest diesel-electric locomotive in the world on the northbound leg of the Denver Post Special. Number 6936 is another member of the Heritage Fleet that calls Cheyenne home and is representative of the DDA 40X class manufactured by the Electromotive Division of General Motors. Steam Locomotive 844 teamed up with the hard-charging 4664 for the return trip to Denver with the Denver Post Special. During 1997 and 1998, the 3985 received extensive maintenance work. In 1999, the 844 and the 3985 again traveled together to Sacramento, California, this time to participate in Rail Fair 99. In July of 2000, the Union Pacific Historical Society returned to Cheyenne for that year's edition of their annual convention. And once again, the beloved Articulated supplied the head-end power for an excursion special over the fabled Sherman Hill. In 2000, the book Nothing Like It in the World by Stephen Ambrose was released. The book tells the story of the building of the Transcontinental Railroad. In June of 2000, the Stephen Ambrose Special, with the author himself on board and the 3985 on the point, traveled from milepost 0 in Council Bluffs, Iowa, west to Fremont, Nebraska, before returning to the original starting point via Missouri Valley. The purpose of this special was to help raise funds for the Union Pacific collection at the Carnegie Library in Council Bluffs, Iowa. The next summer, the 3985 was again pulling an excursion out of Council Bluffs, this time for the cheerful members of the 53-year-old Camrail Club. The special traveled to Sergeant's Bluff, located just south of Sioux City, Iowa, before making the return trip to the Bluffs. During the return trip, the Big Challenger performed a photo run-by for its deserving patrons. few weeks later, our star was captured returning home to Cheyenne after participating in the NRHS convention held in St. Louis, Missouri. In July of 2001, the invited guests of the Denver Post were once again the beneficiaries of a classic train ride, but this time the 3985's teammate was E9B number 963. The 3985 and the 844 are both equipped with MU controls. This allows the engineer of either steam locomotive to control their diesel sidekicks from the cab of the steamer itself. On the return trip to Denver, the 6936 replaced the 963. This scene at Spear demonstrates the articulation of the massive 4664. The next morning, the largest operating examples of steam and diesel power passed through Greeley, Colorado, with a special chartered by the Rocky Mountain Railroad Club. In October of 2001, the 3985 was departing Cheyenne, headed to the Lone Star State, and the crisp fall air made for spectacular scenic effects. It takes a lot of tender loving care by professional craftsmen to keep this behemoth of the rails in operating condition, and it's during the winter months that the majority of the maintenance is performed. The fruits of this labor are realized each and every time the fire is lit and the boiler is brought to pressure. It's the throngs of everyday people who gather trackside to witness this magnificent machine that offer the proof that it is well worth the effort. The Union Pacific Railroad is proud to be able to share the history that this great example of steam locomotive represents. As a public relations tool, the steam program has proven time and time again to be a most valuable asset. It is the hope of Union Pacific, the first transcontinental railroad, that the public continues to have an opportunity to be able to witness this unique and thrilling beast in action.